Hello folks, I continue my post-2019 Australian election wrap-up with a couple of observations. The first one relating to gender politics. The interesting upshot of this shock loss by Labor was the interesting development that, of course, Shorten resigned as leader, which is no big surprise, and now there's the subsequent jockeying by candidates to take over the party. And, of course, unsurprisingly to me, there's an interesting little footnote to this. The deputy leader of the Labor Party, one Tanya Plibersek, like, you know, a deputy leader of a political party is the leader in waiting, who one might expect to step into the role in the advent of a change of leadership. Just because you're a deputy leader doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to step up to the leadership role automatically, of course. But one might expect that the deputy leader would at least, wouldn't you think, be some kind of serious contender in the event of a leadership change. But no. Tanya Plibersek, who I will submit was like female deputy leaders of political parties in the Western world, was purely a token woman appointee, put there as a sop to the progressivists, not just in the left-leaning parties, but in conservative parties as well, and in whom there is no expectation that they are genuine leadership material. Now, in the wake of Labor's loss, you have candidates putting up their hands, and this Tanya Plibersek has just pulled out of the race, citing the family obligations or whatever. Now, she was never leadership material to start with. She's just a token to mollify the progressivist forces in the major parties. And there's no realistic expectation that she is even remotely qualified to be the leader of a major party. And this has happened so many times in the past. I'll cite two examples. For years and years, the Labor Party had as its deputy leader an amazingly nondescript personality called Jenny Macklin. She occupied the position of deputy leader, and as such was ostensibly the second most powerful figure in the Labor Party, which you only need to take one look at it to realise that that wasn't the case. And in leadership spill after leadership spill in the Labor Party, going back some years, she was the deputy leader. There was absolutely no expectation that she would or should, even more to the point, put up a hand for the leadership, because this woman lacked all charisma, gravitas. She was purely a token woman. But the point about it was that I always just sort of found so kind of laughable was that she was the deputy leader before, during and after these election spills, and she remained, although she never, and was never even expected to put up a hand for the leadership, remained as deputy leader for some years in this completely figurehead role, or deputy figurehead role, which just showed the emptiness of this whole routine that these parties go through. This has been replicated now with Tanya Plibersek, this powerful figure in the Labor Party, who at the first sign of being called upon by the party to take over the reins of leadership, she's nowhere to be seen. And what's even more laughable is that's not really, it doesn't even come as a surprise to anybody. I mean, nobody realistically would look at her and see her as a charismatic figure, Prime Minister in waiting, which, if Labor had won the election, she would have been the Deputy Prime Minister. And I can't leave this subject without canvassing the fact that Australia's first token woman Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, was only in Parliament on the back of a woman's quota. She was put into a winnable seat. The only person she had to beat for pre-selection to contest the election and automatically go into Parliament was another woman. And as is the case, she was deemed, once in Parliament, she was deemed to be a person who might amount to some sort of plausible candidate for office. She was promoted into the cabinet, of course, red carpeted, as I call it, when it comes to women politicians, and predictably enough was given red carpet treatment when it came to being appointed the Prime Minister, which is what happens in these situations. Theresa May and so on, they're appointed to these positions, to say nothing of head of the World Bank and so on. So you have women appointed who generally go on to really stuff it up when it comes to trying to win re-election in their own right. Theresa May, Julia Gillard, she contested an election in her own right and failed. She did come back as the Prime Minister, but that was only in a minority government at the behest of the Greens, who forced her to break an election promise that she would introduce a carbon tax. This was a read my lips moment in Australian politics. There would be no carbon tax under Julia Gillard. She only scraped back into the Prime Ministership with the help of the Greens, and bingo, we had a carbon tax. Similar scenario with the Liberals, Australia's putative, supposedly conservative political party. Julia Bishop, I think it was some 10 years ago, she was put into the deputy leadership position, and I've related extensively in a couple of videos ago her political history, how she was basically a bit of a dud. I mean, she was deemed to have sufficient talent and gravitas to be a plausible candidate for high position, red carpet into the ministry, or the shadow cabinet as it then was, and then subsequently the ministry. I've related the history of this woman in the past, but suffice to say, among other weaknesses and failures of her political career as this token woman in high office in the Liberal Party, when push came to shove, when she actually got around to contesting, in this case she did actually contest the leadership in the last leadership change of the Liberal Party and received the princely sum of 10 votes, which caused her to go into meltdown mode and then scream, play the gender card and scream discrimination at the hands of the patriarchy and all this other garbage, and then became a deadly enemy of the party that had totally indulged her. So there you have a number of examples, and I might add in passing that overnight I've received the wonderful news that this hopeless Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, has finally resigned, seen fit to resign. If she had any integrity whatsoever, she would have resigned long ago, having obviously not having the confidence of her party or parliament. Any male politician in that situation would have done that. But she seems to think she was hard done by. She had won this high office through her own efforts, and she was just another token. Even Angela Merkel started her political career as the Minister for Women. I mean, I've never heard of a male leading political figure starting out their political career as a minister for men, but anyway. So that's the story of Tanya Plibersek, deputy leader, in name only, no actual gravitas, little in the way of anything that really made her stand out. And then when the crisis comes, she's not even in the running, possibly with good cause. She may have realised that, like Julie Bishop, she would have received a ridiculously small vote and got out while she could. But the point being that women like this are just obviously lack what it takes to be a party leader, much less a Prime Minister. And they are found out in the end. And it's all just another example of the delusions that the left indulge themselves with. Of course, we could also recall the sorry history of Canada's first token woman Prime Minister, one Kim Campbell. She was appointed to the Prime Ministership, appointed again, by the Conservatives, the progressive Conservatives, I believe, in a fit of political correctness back in the 90s. She went on to lead her Conservative Party to the biggest loss in its history. They won 2 seats. Like, this party was the equivalent of the Liberal Party in Australia, a major political party. She led them to an election where they won only 2 seats, a major political party in the Western world. I'm not sure how many token women Prime Ministers Canada has had since then. I suspect it's 0. And of course, we just keep on hearing ad nauseum from feminists that women should be given a fair go in politics, and quotas for winnable seats and all the rest. And it just shows how empty this whole routine is. Look at Tanya Plibersek and you think, why bother? I mean, when push comes to shove, they're just a no-show. And of course, it's not just women failing to rise to the level of men in terms of how they perform in these roles they're being appointed to, but it also belies the argument you constantly hear about how women really should get more involved in politics, putting aside ideas of inherent discrimination by the patriarchy and all the rest of it. I mean, women are being constantly called upon to get involved in politics. And the Plibersek episode demonstrates, as it so often does, that there's a real limit to just how much women really want to do that, which is the other side of the coin to all the cries of discrimination and so on. And this is just all part of the leftist dogma, the leftist fantasy. The problem with leftists is that they think they can solve every problem through human reason. And people just aren't smart enough to do that. And so, like their communist forebears, they solve one problem and they create 20 more in its place. Humans aren't smart enough to solve every problem through human reason. And leftists, of course, start with an added disadvantage on that score, which is why not only do they fail to solve the bulk of human problems, but why they inevitably wind up in a situation of hopeless contradiction. Like during the election campaign, the charming Penny Wong, who I often think not even 2 Wongs can make a right, Penny Wong managed to insult a political opponent by referring to him as a little man. So right there, she's being a sexist. She's also discriminating against people of a certain height, ist, like with an ist at the end of it, whatever that is. And I'll just, if she doesn't mind, I'll just take the liberty of adding in older white man. I'll just add them in, because I'm quite sure she really could have no objection to me doing that, given what I know about her political philosophy. And so you've got Penny Wong, is sit down and buckle yourself in, you know. A sexist, ageist, I'm really enjoying this, racist, person's heightist. I don't think I've missed anything.